Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Oh, press it.
I've pressed it. I've pressed the magic button, Andy.
Oh, let the magic begin.
Let the magic begin. Oh, dear.
Oh, my goodness. We're off on a loopy start.
No. I want to talk about, man, can you believe the Prometheus trailer?
I know.
It's stunning. There's a website that I frequent where they actually did a shot by shot analysis of it, and then they re-edited it in what they think is chronological order according to the film.
We're already doing the re-editing of assets from this movie. It's not out yet.
I know. It was incredible. So, but it's really, really mind blowing. I cannot wait. And I think it's pretty much, there's no question anymore that it does deal with the spaceship, the origins really of that spaceship the discovery of that spaceship that we find in Alien.
Absolutely.
With the space jockey.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, no contest. And the just when they like dipping their fingers in the little pod-like things, the goo.
Yes.
Numi doesn't look like what's her name. She looks like a person.
Yeah, oh, you mean like Lisbeth?
Lisbeth
Salander?
Yeah, she doesn't. Numi doesn't look like Lisbeth.
No, she looks like a real
awesome.
person.
She's just smoking. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's great.
She's a beautiful person. It looks really, really great. I cannot wait.
I know, and just everything about it, all the actors and everything,
all the light and dark, and all of the goo. June 8th,
the ships.
2012.
I know we're going to be talking about that one here.
Oh man,
can't wait.
I like that John Lindelof.
Damon
Lindelof. See, I'm like because it was written. It was Damon Lindelof and John Spastic. What's his name?
I don't know. I'm gonna let you pull yourself out of this one.
Oh, typey. Damon Lindelof and John Spaihts. Spaights. It has nothing to do with spastic. There's not even a relation to spastic. John Spaihts. That's what I was thinking of. Damon Lindelof. I like him. I do like him. I like him. I like his personalities. Right? I watch a lot of his during the Lost years.
Yeah,
I watched a lot of his behind the scenes stuff.
He's good.
I'm a big fan of the way he thinks.
Stuff. Yeah. I agree. I hear you.
What else have we seen this week? What else is hot this week? I still haven't seen John Carter yet, so I got to hold on.
Oh, well, good. We don't have
all the reviews that I'm reading are like of the people who like it. They're all saying, "Man, that's a good movie. People should see it. Too bad it's totally flopping."
Yeah, I know.
It's like it is
before you know it.
It's like a fish on a hot dock. Like it is. It's just flapping around. Kind of. It's got its mouth is. It's just there's nothing left, and yet I've heard everybody that I've talked to who's seen it is like, you got to give this movie some credit.
I haven't heard anyone say that, so I'm glad you have. I
hang out with much happier people than you do. People who are willing to give the benefit of the doubt.
All my friends are sad, bitter, lonely.
They're sad. They're dark people. They're sad and mean-spirited people.
Yeah, that's them.
All right. So
you know what else I saw this week? Trailer-wise, or extended footage-wise, whatever you want to call it, was more of Snow White and the Huntsman.
Oh man! Okay, so yeah, tell me what you thought.
There's the two dueling Snow White movies coming out, and the first one, Mirror Mirror, looks like a fun one to take my daughter to.
Yeah.
And the Snow White and the Huntsman, the only thing I really knew about it was that the script was on the blacklist, which if people aren't familiar with what the blacklist is, every year at the end of the year, all of the executives and all the bigwigs in Hollywood submit to, I don't know who, somebody, all of the scripts that they think were the best reads that they read that year that still haven't been produced or picked up by anybody. And Snow White and the Huntsman was on that list, I think 2 years ago. And so now, obviously, the script was picked up and is being made into this film that's coming out this summer. And I gotta say, it really knocked my socks off watching the trailer for it. It really, it's as believable and strong a fantasy world as the Lord of the Rings, the whole Middle Earth world from Lord of the Rings. It's just a really amazing looking world that they've created for that film.
I know not much about the original sort of the time of the story, like when the story was being sort of initially being told. But from what I have heard by those who know more than I do, is that the writers or the writer Evan Doherty, why too many G's and H's in names tonight. I'm gonna mess a lot of that up. Evan Doherty did some significant research to get it right, and that this movie, as kind of weird and there's this weird sort of, when you add Huntsman to Snow White, it shakes your context just enough. There's that sort of cognitive dissonance about what the story could be about, because we're so used to the fairy tale, that once you get over that, you realize that that they've taken great pains to tell the story in its own sort of very historically accurate way. And so I am really excited to see this movie.
It looks really cool. I'm very excited, and the
art direction looks just stunning.
Yeah, and I love that they're using the same technique that they did in Lord of the Rings to create the 7 dwarves. They're basically, they've cast regular actors, and they have shrunk them all. So you've got great people like Toby Jones and Bob Hoskins playing some of the dwarves. So I think it's fantastic.
Speaking of this, it's not a movie, right? But I want to talk about Game of Thrones just a little bit.
Oh yeah, because you've been watching that.
I totally cracked out on it. My wife's been out of town this week, and so I went ahead and just did the whole thing and read the book. And so it's taken me about 2 weeks to get through the entire season 1 and the first book, Game of Thrones, in the Song of Ice and Fire saga series. And I don't remember seeing an adaptation done quite as well as this. I feel like what they did with the book in order to tell the story in 10 episodes was as accurate and spot on, pitch perfect as I have seen done in an adaptation recently. I mean, I think back to, I'm trying to think of the other big adaptations. Harry Potter is the big one that comes to mind. And I see, J.K. Rowling is having that same level of kind of involvement of an author with a screenwriter. And I know George Martin was very involved in the adaptation to the HBO series, but I can't think of any others that even come close to capturing the world that he has created, the world of sort of Westeros. And it is great. It is so great. I mean, there are so many of those just like, oh man, they just kicked me in the face moments that are just terrific. It's to the point where you feel it's a saga. Like you can really feel that they're committing to this long-term storytelling. And the Ice and Fire is projected to have 7 books. There are, I think, 5 out now.
Right.
And it's to the point where, Sean Bean. Are you gonna watch it?
I know what happens.
Okay, so you know what I did not.
Oddly enough, I was on a road trip or something. I turned on HBO, and there it was. That was the one scene that I saw. I was
Are you kidding me?
No, and I had no context to the entire story. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, this is that's kind of an interesting scene without realizing that I was watching the climactic moment of the final episode.
Well, and that was what was so great, right? Because I think it was like episode 7 or 8 or something. I mean, they're in the 10 episodes, so there is sort of a denouement to that storyline. But what is so great about just the overall storytelling and the way they did that, I did not see it coming. This character Sean Bean, I felt like he was the guy. Like he was the protagonist of this series.
Right.
And spoiler alert, they lobbed off his head in front of his young daughters and the kingdom. Like they executed him in a surprise turn. Man, I did not see it coming. I hadn't read that far in the book yet. And so it then you realize that this story is much bigger than you sort of anticipate if you're just watching the show and you didn't know anything about this series of books. And now I'm into the second book. I'm almost halfway through the second book, and it is it just absolutely carries right along. I don't know what's going to happen. That Peter Dinklage plays a dwarf in this. In the series, and is one of the most sort of rewarding transformations from book or adaptations of character from book to screen. I mean, he just nails it. And now all I'm thinking every time I think about what the next page I turn is, please don't let this character's head get cut off. Because they'll do that to me. I feel like
that's funny.
I have one other. Go ahead. You're going to say something.
Oh no. I was going to say he won a Golden Globe for that too, for his performance in that.
He is. It's the best thing I've seen him in. He's really great. His character is, it's one of the most sort of complex anti-hero characters that I think that really goes for all of the characters on this show is that they are written at a level of depth that is really rewarding to invest in. And so speaking also of the small screen, I feel like this is my small screen review segment.
I guess so.
We saw the season 2 finale of my favorite zombie show, The Walking Dead.
Don't say anything about it because I've only just finished season 1, and so I don't want to know anything that's happened in season 2 yet. And I can't find out because it's not available yet on Netflix. I've got to twiddle my thumbs for a little while.
This is going to be very difficult because it probably won't hit Netflix until September because season 3 kicks off in October. So that's usually right. They give you about 30 days of the promotional
right
window to catch up. I will my impression. I will just tell you.
Mm-hmm.
I quite enjoyed the season finale. I really like what it sets up for season 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of the people who agree with me could fit in my office right now.
Oh, really? Wow.
Well,
interesting.
No, I like, I think there are a lot of people who still really like the show, but there's a lot of criticism of season 2 and that season 2 was like, they're equating with Lost season 2, that there was, this is the dark before the dawn, and that there were some tough episodes to get through in season 2. It was not like season 1. It's like they expanded the season to 13 episodes and the same 6 of them were good, from season 1, which was only 6 episodes. So I don't know. It's like they just ran out of steam. But I think the last 2 episodes have been very, very strong, and they're getting back in alignment with the comic in many ways. And I like that, the graphic novel. So I have one more thing to talk about, small screen coming soon, which the trailer, I think the trailer just hit this week. If so, I discovered it this week if it's been out longer, but that is the Blood and Chrome. So say we all. Are you up on this? Do you know?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Andrew, Blood and Chrome is the next Battlestar Galactica series.
Really?
And so what I've heard about this is that the team has gone back and they have said, you know what, we have this we have these awesome assets. We have people who really love the Adamas and really love the BSG universe and really want to get out of the BSG universe. Like there's a hole missing. There's like a void missing in this kind of storytelling, this sort of, heavy political kind of action oriented, science fiction programming.
Right.
And they tried to do something different with Caprica, which I quite liked. It was a very different show, and I think people were expecting it to be more of a prequel with the same general tone and tenor of Battlestar Galactica, and it was not. It was a very different kind of show, and it didn't make it very far. But this show apparently takes place just like 10 years after the start of the first Cylon War, and right as Bill Adama is assigned as a fighter pilot to the brand new flagship Galactica. So we're not dealing with Galactica, the just turned into a museum piece. We're dealing with Galactica as a pride of the fleet piece, and the season or the series kicks off where the grizzled captain admiral of the ship and the young Bill Adama are trying to find a place to agree, and there's a big battle, a skirmish that ends up being a turning point of the war, and the trailer that hit the web this week is freaking awesome.
Wow, I'll have to check that out. Blood and Chrome, huh?
Yeah, and the trailer, they chose to go with Immigrant song for the soundtrack for the trailer.
Really? That's a popular trailer song.
It is a very popular trailer song. It's the Karen O version from Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, really?
Yes, and
even more interesting.
It is even more interesting. And I'm watching it. I'm thinking, I thought I was totally spoiled to that song from the open to Dragon Tattoo, but I'll tell you, it is so great. I had to go back. I cranked up iTunes and I turned it up real loud, and I just sort of sat here and enjoyed myself to it. It's funny. Great. It's a great trailer.
Cool. Well,
so
I'll have to check that one out.
Lots of good small screen stuff coming. Really, Prometheus is the big thing. Prometheus and Snow White and the Huntsman. What is there anything else we need to talk about before we jump into this thing?
Well, we'll just mention that Hunger Games opens this weekend, which hopefully I'll get out to watch at some point, and we can chat about it next week. Is
that something we're supposed to be excited about? I will go see it.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
It's something we're supposed to be more excited about than John Carter.
Really?
Yes.
I'm honestly, I'm glad you said something. I have not been excited about this movie. I've totally been writing it off as an adaptation of a book that I'm also not supposed to care much about. And you're telling me otherwise. I'm going to go see it.
Yeah, go see it.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And we'll talk about it next week too. Give
Sounds
mini
good.
Review. All right. So what are we doing tonight?
So this week we're talking about a fantastic film from 1971, Klute.
Klute, John Klute.
Mm-hmm.
I had okay. I thought that I had not actually seen this movie. Right?
Oh, okay.
I thought that I mean, this was one of the ones I was going to write off as a movie that, was a movie we like, and the "we" was in quotes, and I was going to see it, and then I would fall in love with it, and that it would be one of those things. And it turns out I had seen this movie.
Okay.
And there was a lot to really, really like about this movie.
Okay.
And I have... I think it's complicated by the fact that I have zero nostalgia for the 1970s.
Oh, well, it definitely feels 70s.
And that's the thing. When you look at, and so what I would like to hear from you, the filmmaker, and I say that with a capital F. You are I call you, okay, and a capital L too. There's two capital letters. What is it about that is so special about 1970s cinema that has so many cinema pundits saying that these films were defining for modern cinema?
Well, what happened was, I mean, we were coming off of a time, where it was just a lot of big studio films. And obviously there was a big, change in society with the 60s and the whole hippie movement and make love, not war, and all of that sort of thing. And so the mentality started shifting. And what happened was people started making, in a sense, a more independent style of film. It was much more personal, much more gritty. They were not afraid to show things that were more raw. And that was a big difference from the style of films that had been going on through the 50s and 60s. And because that's, 50s and 60s, it was all, all of the war movies were very patriotic war movies. You had all these just lovely, wonderful Technicolor musicals and everything. It was a very different style. And then starting in the late 60s, it really shifted, and you had this real solid group of filmmakers who were making films that were darker, were grittier, were more about real emotions, about real people, that weren't afraid to delve into kind of the dirtiness of and messiness of life. And so that's really what happened in the 70s. And also because of the things happening in politics with Watergate and everything, people started getting more less comfortable with the government, more suspicious of things, conspiracy theories cropped up. And so that came in as well, all of the paranoia and everything. And then Vietnam War, it really snowballed. And then that style really had a big swell in the 70s, and it's definitely still continued. But the other thing that happened in the 70s was that's when the real blockbusters were born, starting pretty much with like Jaws and Star Wars. And those two films created a whole new burst for the studios that has been continuing to this day. And we see that with all the giant, ridiculously expensive tentpole movies that they make every summer and all that. So, the 70s was a big time for both of those sorts of films. And that's really, I think, why so many people look at the 70s as such a pivotal point for filmmaking. It really changed the history.
Yeah, I can see that. And I what I really like about your description of it is that it puts it in sort of this historical context of what was coming out at the time and what was going on historically at the time that actually, sort of spurred the style of filmmaking. I like to say that there is this sort of mirror that the filmmakers are holding up to us, and they want us to look at something about ourselves, and we just have to be bright enough and brave enough to see it. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the movies that were extremely successful in the 1970s, right? I mean, Fiddler on the Roof, I think, was the number one film in the 70s. The French Connection, I think, is one that really is commonly paralleled to Klute. Same year, and a very different style of a different style or a different pace, similar style, different pace, but Roy Scheider. And really, how can you go wrong with a Roy Scheider?
It was definitely his decade.
It was his it was his decade. Dirty Harry. These sorts of the gritty. The gritty sort of detective films, mm-hmm. Where everything is filthy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that is sort of celebrated when you look at the world that is portrayed in these movies. Everything is filthy and just sort of this close to falling apart. And I think that's important because when we look at films today that are set in the 70s, you can sort of get a sense that they were set in the 70s to look kind of filthy, but there was a real intention with why 70s films look the way they do because of that historical sort of context of mistrust and this new awareness of greed and all of these this sort of materialism and that is just sort of spiking in the 70s and building in the 70s toward the real celebration of these concepts in the 80s. And so, in many respects, Klute in 1971 was sort of a harbinger of things to come in terms of the style and tone of the film.
It was. And if you look at those films that you just mentioned, I mean, they definitely took a very different turn when you came to Klute, kind of early in the 70s. And it kind of led, in a way, it kind of led the way for the rest of these films in the 70s. I mean, even if you look at a movie like Bullet, which was just a few years before Klute, it is not nearly, I mean, sure, there's blood, there's great chases, and it certainly has a little more of that rougher edge, but it's not nearly as dark or foreboding as a film like Klute. And a big part of that falls on the shoulders of Gordon Willis, the cinematographer, who really essentially you could say is a person who almost defined this look of the 70s. Starting with this film, he really kind of gave birth to the whole the dark nature of this really dark world of within a film where you don't see everything in the frame. The walls aren't all lit. Everything is very he lit, like for Klute, he lit pretty much just from the top, which he stayed away from lighting from the floor. And by lighting from up high, he created eyeshadows that are much more natural and something that we're used to seeing. But at the time, it was a very, new thing. People weren't used to seeing that. And then if you follow his work from that to Godfather and Godfather 2, he kept that same sort of thing up, where he really wasn't lighting the walls. It was just light on people and then just pools of darkness. And it really helped create that whole look.
Yeah, you feel, I mean, you mentioned Godfather, it's that is sort of masters that look. I mean, that is a master's class in that terrifying, what ends up being that terrifyingly dramatic, key light from above. Style, and boy, you really get that. I mean, you mentioned that sort of compressed. There's this sort of compression to Klute, where, I mean, it's just chock full of close-ups, and it ends up, you sort of, when somebody, your kid tells you a joke and it's it's a little funny, and then it's not funny, then it's kind of annoying, but then it's funny again. That's sort of the same feeling I get with this sort of compression. I feel like I'm in a sardine can, and it starts out and you're just following the faces of these actors, and they're just going about their daily lives, and I want to talk about that in a second. But they're going about their daily lives, and you're just watching them. They're doing it, going to the refrigerator, they're getting it, they're doing a thing, they're walking outside, they're doing a thing, close up on a face, close up on a this, close up on a this. Maybe we get a medium shot of somebody taking a shirt off, and then it comes back to a close up. And eventually you realize that, by the time you get to the payoff at the end, you realize that you are this is a locked room kind of a thing. The framing creates a locked room of I don't want to use the word paranoia because I feel like that's going to get overused in this conversation, but that's the experience that you have when you are Bree sitting in the room with Cable at the end of the film.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right. I think that the camera work really plays into that, compressing things, but at the same time, I think it also creates some really. There are quite a few wide shots in here where they're really wide, creating really interesting tableaus where it almost diminishes the person within this overbearing world, right?
Absolutely, because there is always something in the way. Like the depth of field that is of just objects that are constantly obstructing a clean view. Go ahead, I interrupted you.
Well, no, I was going to say, I think one of the most interesting shots is when we first meet Bree, and this is Bree Daniels. Should we mention what the story is?
Yeah, we probably should, but we should. Do the story. So what is the story about?
So the story is a man goes missing. His name is Tom Gruneman. He's from a Pennsylvania town, and his cop friend, John Klute, is hired by somebody at Gruneman's company, Cable, to basically investigate because they don't feel that the FBI is doing a good enough job. The only lead that they have are these really dirty letters that Tom Gruneman wrote to this call girl, Bree Daniels, in New York. And so John Klute goes and he introduces himself to her, trying to find out information. He starts like tapping her lines, listening to her conversations, and basically starts kind of, this odd voyeuristic relationship with her, trying to get information about what happened to Tom Gruneman. And in the process, he solves the crime, but also builds this relationship with Bree Daniels, who's been trying to get out of the business, trying to start an acting career and all this sort of stuff. And in a way, I think this film is more of a character study of these people than it is an actual thriller, because in all honesty, it's not very thrilling because the killer is pretty much revealed very early in the film. Yeah, we find out that Cable has been behind all of this right from the start. And so really it's less of a who done it, and it's more of a will Klute figure it out and save her in time sort of story.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a rescue story. Yeah. But I want to get back to that real life point, because the thing that I walk away with this movie after, just sort of letting it kind of wash over me is one of the things I like so much about the style is that this movie is made in transitions of life, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, this movie is not about action, bump, action, bump, action. It's about watching people evolve through the things they do day to day that are just sort of mundane. They go into auditions and they go, they just live their lives. And so I find that, Pakula, Alan J. Pakula.
Yeah, Pakula, right.
It takes a great sort of methodical approach to building up the lives of these people. And so when you say it's a character study, I think you're really right on, because this is not a movie that celebrates the action of the investigation. The investigation is frankly not interesting,
right?
Really until the very end, when the race kind of kicks in. It's that last sort of 15 minutes when you realize that there is a race that is, that Klute is running, and now he has to track down Bree, and I find that it all builds up to, or the buildup is really fast. From this sort of, kind of methodical plod, watching Bree kind of change her life through her relationship with Klute, to, oh my God, she's in the room with, Cable. And right. It is one of the most haunting sort of scenes of realization that, and when you say, that sort of 70s style of dark kind of showing you things that you may not have seen, this really was it.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't you think that the listening to the tapes end up being pretty a pretty gruesome.
It's a really haunting tool. It's really very terrifying. Well, the whole thing at the end, that whole in this clothing factory and everything, it's such a terrifying place. And when she's walking down and she finally realizes that Klute, or that Cable is there watching her, and he's standing, and it cuts to that close up of him behind that wall of plastic.
The music also by Michael Small is terrific, and this scene absolutely highlights the score. Yeah,
his score is stunning. He's very great at 70s thriller scores. But and that moment is just so terrifying. And then you're right, that whole scene where Cable plays the tape for Bree, where he killed Arlen Page, her friend. It's terrifying. And it's just two shots. It's a shot of Bree's face as she listens to this tape and relives her friend's last moments, and shots of Cable as he listens to it and watches her reaction. I mean, it's just terrifying. And you can see in this moment, along with so many throughout the film, you can see why Jane Fonda rightly won an Oscar for this role. I mean, she's just, it's such a heartbreaking role, like moment to watch somebody have to suffer through.
You know, the experience of watching watching Cable, played by Charles.
I think is it Chaffee? Chaffee or Coffee, I don't know. Yeah.
Charles Coffey is one of the things that about his performance in particular. You know, he's just kind of the dirty old man for most of the movie. Mm-hmm. But what really comes out in this final scene, he's having this conversation with her, and he's coming to his own sense of sort of realization this whole time. You know, mm-hmm. but the way his conversation, the way his language is sort of being presented to us, he is so calm, but it's not murderously calm. It's not demonic calm. It's a guy who is so comfortable with who he is as a businessman, as a man who, you know, has a really dark side when he goes and sees hookers, and as a guy who's really about to, you know, kill this woman sitting with him, and getting really the sort of mechanical satisfaction out of playing the tape of him doing the same thing with Bree's friend. Mm-hmm. And the tape, it's the exact same voice. It's the same voice saying, you know, my name is Peter Cable, and I'm being very forthright with you, so you know my intentions are not, you know, or my intentions are pure, or whatever he says. Why don't you just turn your head this way? You can just lay down here, just sit down here. And then she starts screaming.
Right.
And that is the moment that you realize this movie just got me. Like, this was an hour and 49-minute build up to right now.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about that is, like, right before he plays the tape, he's talking to her, and it's almost like you were saying, he's that in that very controlled way, he's talking through things, like almost this weird moment of self-examination when he's realizing that Klute was kind of setting him up and all this stuff. But he says, you know, I've done terrible things, but I can't consider myself a terrible man.
Right.
I've killed 3 people, and I'd still want to say it was an accident. Do you see? It's like this is a perfect example of what they always say, is that the antagonist of your film never sees themselves as the bad guy.
Right. Well, and he actually says, and you've got the script open, right?
Yeah.
What is the line he says? So it really doesn't matter what I do.
Yeah.
Right? What is that line? Because
that
line
doesn't matter what I do anymore, does it?
Yeah. So it doesn't. The way Charles Coffey delivers that line is like, that is a pivotal sort of character transition for him, right? Mm-hmm. But it is mechanical, not emotional.
Yeah. Well, it makes you wonder, because, you know, he ends up committing suicide. It makes you wonder if Klute hadn't shown up at that moment, if he would have still committed suicide, like after he had killed Bree, or what would have happened.
Yeah.
If he would have fled, because now he knows, everybody knows it's him. Like, where does that leave him? So, I mean, it's a pretty interesting moment of realization that he's had there.
It really is. You know, so he works at the same company from Gruneman, who through this process we learn has been completely, you know, posthumously exonerated from all wrongdoing and the letters and everybody. He never wrote the letters, right? I mean, did I read that right?
He never wrote them.
He never wrote those letters. He was a good guy, and I think we only see him in the very opening sequence at dinner.
Exactly. Yeah, he's just in the opening Thanksgiving scene, and then we only see his photo the rest of the time.
Right. And I found that opening scene really interesting. The way that I don't know if I would characterize it as a 70s style of sound design, But there is this sense that I get from many movies of this era where it is okay to have a lot of people talking over one another if you can artfully have the one that you need to hear come out. And this was something that was used a lot in Jaws. There's a lot of just crazy beach voice.
Yeah, and Robert Altman, he really is the
Robert Altman,
director
absolutely.
who really perfected that. And he really made that his own style of filmmaking, where he would do that, where he'd have a lot of actors just going on and doing their own thing, and he would have them all mic'd individually, and then in the editing he could manipulate which one he wanted to focus on. So it definitely is an interesting way. And actually that opening is also something I was saying earlier about the tableaus and how it really paints, it's almost like a painterly image when we open. It's just this, it's a very kind of flat shot across the whole table, right?
Yeah.
And you just see them all sitting there at the table having this Thanksgiving meal, or whatever it is they're eating. And it's very kind of static shots of this, and then we establish the different characters and pan across them and stuff. But it's just very, it's just like a painted image of this thing. And then that paired with that interesting audio, it just, in, I don't know how long it was, all of 30 seconds or something, it just creates this environment for us. It's really, really interesting open.
It is, because without really, without showing us a lot of action, they actually establish a really pivotal relationship between John Klute and Gruneman, and that sets up Donald Sutherland's John Klute for his whole reason for taking this on. And they make a big deal out of the fact that he has never, once he has retired, and now a private detective, once he takes this case on, they say, have you ever done a missing persons case? No. Have you ever spent much time in the city in New York City where you're going to be? No, I never have. And suddenly we realize that it's because he has this deep relationship with Gruneman, who, he was at the dinner party with. Earlier, and to do that in 25-second tableau at dinner, that's efficient.
Mm-hmm. And it's very efficient the way that it does this amazing jump cut right there to an empty chair, and then you just hear the police talking about how Tom is missing. And then you realize that it's 6 months later, and no, I guess it's not 6 months later at that point, but you realize that, now he's missing and they're doing this investigation. It's a really interesting way to just get you right into the story. I thought it was fantastic. It was
fantastic. Now, this movie is considered the first in a 3-movie informal trilogy called the Paranoia trilogy.
Yeah, Alan J. Pakula's Paranoia trilogy. The Parallax View in 74, and All the President's Men in 76.
And so that's why, talk about Paranoia.
Well, I think that the nature of this film, aside from the fact that the thriller aspect isn't very thrilling, it still is about paranoia. Something about Bree Daniels that we establish early on is that she's a very paranoid character. She feels people are following her.
People are following her.
And in reality, people are. That's why she...
Like John. Let's not forget John Klute himself. The investigator sets up an apartment in her building, taps all her phone calls, and follows her around.
Right. Well, and that's something else about the paranoia is not only are people following her, we're watching both Klute follow her and eavesdrop on her conversations, as well as Cable. Right? We see him kind of stalking her from across the street. We see him sitting up in his very, lofty office up in this skyscraper, like a, king of the world sort of, power figure, listening to her conversations with this crazy painting, or not painting, but a photo of like the moon landing behind him. It was a very strange art direction in that.
Right.
Which really
that was bizarre. That was with the giant door.
The giant door that's a photo of the moon landing. And then that's a really interesting frame, the way that shot is framed, because the lights are reflecting on the ceiling above his head, and they look like rays of light shooting out of his head. And he literally looks like he is this god sitting on top of everything, even like he's so high up in the atmosphere that he is up with the moon. It's an amazingly interesting way to portray that this guy is in this place where he thinks he's above everybody.
That is, to me, that's the sort of that's the paranoia that sticks out to me the most, which is the mistrust. When Donald Sutherland goes to Coffee, or when Klute goes to Cable, and says, "I need you to wire me $500 so I can buy this address book."
Right.
That what that means in the plot is that, Klute has come to this realization that the guy he is working for, Cable, is also the villain.
Right.
And the villain in this case is not just this guy who has a dark side, but he is, he has been portrayed all along as the ivory tower guy. He is institutional wealth. He is, he represents, the big business that we are just now in the early 70s realizing that we probably shouldn't trust. Yeah. And that's the transition you get that I think Donald Sutherland plays really well in this film, which is, I get it. I think I get it now, that I have just been played by big business and by this guy at a big company who thinks he can control me.
Yeah, exactly.
And play me. And I think this, we talked about how this movie was just sort of the forebearer of many other movies that make that statement so much more clear, when you get to sort of the parallax view, which is just weird. There's a lot of weird with the parallax view, and All the President's Men, and Network, which is a film that does the same thing and does it really quite blatantly and baldly. Like, there is no metaphor in this movie. It is the Ned Beatty speech in the conference room,
right,
is absolutely legendary for calling out the world of business and exactly. For what it is, and I think that's what we're building to. We're starting here with this movie. This is the historical sort of artistic context, and we're moving toward that, which is the sense of cultural revelation.
Yeah,
man, that's heavy. God, that's really good.
That is. Oh man, it's good stuff.
So there is. Go ahead. You say more. Bring more genius.
The other interesting thing about the paranoia that this film establishes, or I shouldn't say it establishes, but it's actually continuing from other filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock and from Blow Up and other ones like Peeping Tom, is that not only are we watching all of these people, following, and we're getting the sense, but we ourselves are becoming the voyeurs. And it's almost as if the filmmaker is pointing out that we're voyeurs as well. Like when we're watching Bree through the roof, through her skylight, we've all of a sudden, now we are the voyeurs. And now it's this really interesting look at, at the whole side of paranoia as far as who's watching and what does it really mean. Which also really plays interestingly with the whole nature of being a call girl, and oddly enough, also being an actor, and how the whole nature of that is somebody in front of you, essentially putting on a show for you. It really does bring the whole thing forward about what it is to be a voyeur, and it's an interesting take on the whole paranoia look at things.
I think this is one of those movies that you have to look at like this in order to really enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because it's an easy one to let go.
It is. You have to really look at what else is going on here. I made the mistake when I first watched this years ago of dismissing it because I was just expecting a thriller.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, well, there you go. That wasn't really that thrilling. So, and watching it, time and time again since then, I'm like, oh, I started really seeing what they were doing with it and looking at how the characters were developing and the relationship there and the mistrust and just all of that stuff going on in here. It's a much more interesting film when you are looking at it from that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I wonder. I wonder if the same. I mean, it held up well, right? And it was a profitable movie. We didn't run the numbers, but it, from what I gather, and you'll go into your backroom.
It
source.
doesn't. It's too old to have all of that info input. I mean, it made $12.5 million at the box office, which at the time I think was probably pretty good. But I don't know what the budget was. I think
it was 2.5.
Okay.
Was what I
look at you with your you got all the secrets now.
Totally crushing it, right? That was great. I totally pulled that out of nowhere. Of course, what I'm struggling with is I have like 35 tabs open, and so I can't actually find which one actually confirms that. I have too many tabs open now. Yeah, so 2.5. Okay, box office budget 2.5 estimated from this is IMDb. So, okay. And yeah, no, so it made money, and I think for 1971, this was obviously pre-Jaws and pre-Star Wars, and so that was seems to me to be a respectable film.
Yeah,
this was Pakula's second film, right?
The second one that he directed. He had been producing films. This is interesting. He had been producing films since he was in his 30s. So he started his first film that he produced was with Robert Mulligan in about 57. And then he and Mulligan created a production company, the first film of which was, and this was, I think, 62, the first film of which was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he, that of course got all sorts of accolades, and then he continued producing for a while, but then this was the first film that he actually directed. And the second film that he directed. The first film was just before that is The Sterile Cuckoo, which I haven't seen.
Well,
but apparently, Liza Minnelli does quite a good turn in it.
Interesting sort of cast of leading ladies he gets to work with. So Jane Fonda plays Bree, and what do we think of Jane Fonda? I mean,
everyone has their opinions of Jane Fonda. I think that she can be a very powerful actress. She's done some great films. I think. She certainly had her time being very vocal with her political activism, which I think turned a lot of people against her. And I think there's just not as many people that interested in her anymore. And then, of course, she did her exercise videos. I remember my mom working out with her all the time on her little videos and everything. But I mean, she had a great run of films in the 60s and 70s. She was in just lots of great things like Cat Ballou, Barefoot in the Park, Barbarella. They Shoot Horses, Don't They?
China Syndrome. Seriously.
Yeah, China Syndrome.
Talk about a great disaster movie.
Oh, I know. It's a great one. On Golden Pond.
On Golden Pond.
Yeah.
Norman.
The loons.
Coot.
The loons.
The loons. Norman. The Electric Horseman. There's nothing like a horse with Christmas lights on it. Nothing like it.
I mean, she's done a lot of good stuff, but she's also not. She's one of the actresses who's not afraid of putting herself out into the public life for things other than acting, and because of that, I think she's become very divisive with people.
Yeah.
But you watch something like this. I tell you, that scene when she comes in to visit the old man. The first time in that clothes factory, when she walks in and you get that close up of her, that has to be the most luscious, gorgeous shot of Jane Fonda in her entire career. I mean, is she not gorgeous in that close up?
She is. She's gorgeous. And that scene, that sequence where she is retelling her experience at Cannes, which she never actually attended, but it's part of her sort of character that she plays with this old man, is some of the best, like most nuanced performance that she gives in this film.
And then, go ahead.
Which otherwise, to me, the performance, her performance in Klute is, generally wooden,
you think so?
which is, and then it is punctuated by some just incredible work. Like
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it's wooden at all.
I find most of Jane Fonda wooden.
Yeah.
I have a hard time finding her with much of an emotional range until she has it, and it's just suddenly she's all over the place. And so, there are moments in this movie that I think are just terrific and probably made better because I, find her generally. And, I think, there is something to that. And she is not set up well in this movie. I should say that differently. Her character of Bree is set up perfectly in this movie. The first time we see her is in a long line of would-be actresses who are going out for a part, and they're being judged based on superficial, elements of just sitting in this chair. She's got the right color but the wrong hair. She's got bad hands. She's got, and if you did not, this was in you had sent a review. Well, who wrote that review? This was part of the research which is, I'm going to find this because it was a really astute comment. If you did not know, if you try to put yourself back in 1971, and in 1971 she was already, a name but obviously a young actress. But if you did not know better, none of the women in that lineup looked any more, sort of interesting or beautiful or blockbuster superstar than she did. And so you're almost set up to say this is a woman who is, she's a dime a dozen.
Yeah. And that I was actually going to talk about that shot at the beginning, and I got sidetracked on I think telling the plot. But that shot is another perfect example of that tableau where you've got this wide shot of just all of these actresses, wannabe actresses, in a row at the bottom of the frame. And then above them, you have three enormous like art photos of some woman or something, just like hovering over their heads in this really fascinating composition. And then, like you said, you've got these producers basically judging them. It's a fantastic introduction to a character. I think it really sets up exactly, the nature of her world. She's this, trying to break free of this, this life of being pushed down by all of these people.
Tim Brayton.
Tim, yes. I'm looking at his page right now.
Hard to actually find his name.
I know. This is some blog that we found.
He's been doing film review and critique since 2005, and it's a very well written site. Antagony and Ecstasy.
And he went through and reviewed every single one of Alan J. Pakula's films.
Bold move.
Yeah.
For Tim, it is a terrifically written site, and major kudos for that particular review of Klute. It is a really well spoken and well written critique of the movie.
It is.
Yeah.
Definitely is.
So anyhow, yeah, I'm good.
One last thing, which also, just another moment, just to mention Jane Fonda, but I think an amazingly powerful moment for me when I watch her in this film is when she goes back to the old man's shop, the clothing making shop.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And she calls him and says, "Hey, can I come over?" He says, "Yeah, in a half hour." And she comes over and he's gone. And his secretary said he took off 15 minutes ago, and he's left an envelope for her with $50 in it and no note, which is just like the ultimate put off, Yeah. I mean, that's exactly a defining moment for her as to the world that she's in, is like, even the people that she think might have some ounce of compassion for her really don't. For them, all it is just about buying the trick.
Absolutely. I mean, and as much as I find, everything since Barbarella wooden of Jane Fonda's, that's not entirely true. And I find she did I think she did a great job in this movie, and I think her emotional highs are really mark a terrific performance, and she did win the best actress Oscar for this. And her speech, is it okay to say that it is the shortest, or certainly one of the shortest in movie history?
Is it? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's an easy one to quote. Thank you very much, members of the Academy. Thank you for all who applauded. There's a great deal to say, and I'm not going to say it tonight. I would just like to really thank you very much.
Huh.
That's it.
That's very nice. Short and sweet and to the point.
Short and sweet and to the point. This is a terrific movie. And so I started by saying I don't have any nostalgia for the 1970s, and I still really don't. I have a hard time. No, I just, and we're going to do more 70s movies, and I think it is fair to say that I dislike the time, but I do. There's a lot to love about the movies.
Yeah.
Some of them.
Well, inevitably you're watching one of these 70s movies, and all of a sudden you're thrust into a disco scene.
My goodness.
And that's when it becomes the hardest. When all of a sudden you're listening to that just horrible disco music, and you've got that scene, and it is what it is. You get used to it, but
yeah,
you just acknowledge that's all part and parcel with the decade.
Do you think we're ever gonna do Blue Thunder?
I don't know if that's on our list. I honestly don't remember a single thing about that.
Come on, Jaffo.
I don't remember a single. I'm not even sure if I've ever seen that. I know.
What?
I know I have. I just can't remember it at all. I confuse it, and there was another helicopter movie right around the same time.
Airwolf? No, that's a TV. That was the TV show. No, there was another.
There was another
movie.
one. Yeah.
No, this was the helicopter movie. This was the fantastic Roy Scheider helicopter movie.
I just have to say again, the 70s was his decade. I mean, good Lord, from beginning to end, he was in so many good movies.
Totally. All right, so next week we're going to do the Parallax View.
Yeah, we're going to do the whole Paranoia trilogy.
And then the one I'm looking forward to the most, obviously, is the third in the Paranoia trilogy, the All of the President's Men.
Yes. Oh, one thing that we didn't mention about this is that it was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay also by the brothers, Andy and Dave Lewis.
They are real brothers.
They are real brothers who were basically started, I think, writing commercials and then moved into writing TV shows in the 50s and wrote lots of old like Western TV shows and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then very few features. And then that was kind of the end. I think Andy Lewis, shortly after Klute, decided to just get out of the business, and that was it for him. And his brother Dave stuck in a little longer, but not too much. So it's interesting. Wow. I'm interested to learn more about those brothers.
Absolutely. Terrific movie.
Yes.
Where can people, you got to say where people can find you.
Oh yeah, we didn't do our
thing. We didn't do any of the thing.
I know. At the Movie Monkey on Twitter.
All right. And Facebook, the Movie Monkey.
And Facebook, the Movie Monkey.
Do you like, would you prefer? I mean, if you could only do one, it sounds like you would send people to Twitter. You don't like people finding you on Facebook then?
They can find me on Facebook. That's fine. But Twitter is, I think, much more, film focused. But if they just want to be my friend, they can find me on Facebook.
I love new friends. I have no name so clever. I am just Pete Wright everywhere. Twitter.
But you're not just Pete Wright.
No, actually, it is Pete Wright.
Yes. You're going to confuse people.
I know. Pete Wright, all one word. At Pete Wright on Twitter and Facebook.com/Pete Wright, and on Google Plus, and pretty much everywhere. So,
Google Plus for me too. I always forget that one.
Definitely should head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show, or in your favorite pod catcher, and subscribe to the show. It actually really helps us. If you're listening to the show on the website, it really helps us if you subscribe. So please do take that step. Subscribe to the show so we can actually track how many people are actually listening to the show. It helps us out as we look at sponsors on the rashpixel.tv network, and you can catch all the other shows on rashpixel.tv, rashpixel.tv. It's that easy. Go there and find some other shows. And I think that, as they say, is that.
Is that?
Yeah. Thanks for a good chat. This is good to get back into this movie. I'm glad to have done it.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad to have watched it again, and I look forward to talking about the next two.
Can't wait. Catch you next week.
All right.
Bye. Here at The Next Reel, we've been passionately discussing movies week after week since 2011. That's a lot of movies and a lot of conversation.
Sure is, Pete, and to be honest, it's a lot of work too, but it's work that we love. If you have been enjoying our show, we'd like to remind you that there are ways to support us even if you're not able to become a member just yet. You might have heard us talk about our new watch page where we've listed every movie that we've talked about paired with Amazon or Apple links to rent or buy the movie.
Now we'd like to introduce you to our originals page. Let's take a trip down memory lane, Andy. Do you remember what the first film we discussed on The Next Reel was that was an adaptation?
Well, let's see. It wasn't obviously our Indiana Jones series because those were all original. Then we did Charlie Kaufman. Of course. It was adaptation from Susan Orlean's Orchid Thief.
Exactly. We have covered quite a few adaptations over the years, and now we're providing a way for our listeners to delve into the original source material.
That's right. Just head over to thenextreel.com/originals, and you can see the list of all the adaptations that we have discussed.
From our David Fincher series, featuring The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, Zodiac, Benjamin Button, and Fight Club.
To our Paranoia trilogy with The Parallax View and All the President's Men, we have covered a variety of adaptations.
Those were some great discussions, especially Fight Club. And let's not forget our baseball series with The Natural and Field of Dreams, adapted from Shoeless Joe.
And Up in the Air and Thank You for Smoking. So many memorable conversations.
Absolutely. And you know what's exciting? Each purchase you make through our links doesn't cost you any extra, but a percentage goes to support The Next Reel and our family of shows.
You can support us while diving deeper into these fantastic stories, whether it's the paper, audiobook, or Kindle version.
We've also included plays and movies. If they were the source, we've put it on there.
So what are you waiting for? Head to thenextreel.com/originals, support The Next Reel, and get your next great read today.
I'm off to reread Fight Club. Now, where did I put my Kindle?